Hey Village, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. If you see that I have my hair dried and I have makeup on, it means this is gonna be a pretty important video with a lot of great information. Today, I'm gonna talk to you guys about the home study and specifically the interview portion. This can be scary and daunting for any potential foster caregiver. The questions can seem invasive and may even trigger you depending on what trauma has come up in your life. And at the end of the day, your foster care license hangs in the balance of how you answer these questions. And I have to mention that this is all gonna come from the perspective of a foster caregiver, not a caseworker, not an assessor. So what I'm gonna do is go over some of those main topics, possible questions that you could be asked during this process. By no means is this supposed to give you the answers to the questions that you might get asked. That would not be in the best interest of the kids who come into care and their families. This interview is not something you want to go about in an inauthentic way. The best thing you can do is be open and honest. This will make sure that the assessor has all the information they need to make an informed decision on whether or not you are ready to take in kids from care. And that's not to say that if they say that you're not ready, that is a no forever. What that probably means is, there might be additional training or counseling that could be put into place to get you to the point where you'd be ready. And if I have to be honest, I feel like it would have to take a lot to not pass your home study interview. And mainly that's because in most areas, foster caregivers are in demand. And so assessors are really trying to pass as many families as possible. But that's another video. Don't want to get into that messy topic just yet. For what it's worth, in my opinion, I feel like assessors should be looking for qualities in caregivers that really check the boxes of self-awareness, openness, flexibility, adaptability, and patience. But generally speaking, this is your agency, or if you're going directly through the county, this is their first opportunity to really get to know you as a person. And the questions are going to try to help them determine what kind of a caregiver you will be for children in care. So let's jump into the topics and questions. And again, this is going to vary depending on where you live, depending on your agency, depending on your county. Everything depends. It's why in our merchandise store, we specifically have a quote of "it depends," because that just kind of goes with foster care. And these topics and questions are kind of going to branch, it might start pretty vague and they might ask, clarifying questions. And again, that hope is to really just get to know you better. So to start off with, they're going to start asking about your personal history and specifically what your home life was like. How was your family made up? What kind of rules were in the house? How were punishments or, consequences? How were those things determined? What your relationship was like with, either of your parents? If you had siblings, what that relationship looked like. You can talk about the best parts of your family and maybe more of those challenges. They might ask what kind of trouble you got into as a kid or a teenager, if you've, been involved with law enforcement at all. They might ask when you decided to leave home and if your parents supported that decision. And then they'll dig into your work history and what that looked like as well. So this is trying to get just a full picture of who you are, how you were brought up. And I think that home life and those family questions, those are really going to potentially shape how, you are with your family and in your home. Not that they're going to be identical, because again, there can be a lot of clarifying questions. And to share a personal example of that, when I was younger, our house was not the cleanest. And, it was something that really stuck with me. My mom did her best, but at the same time, it was something that really bothered me growing up. And so when I talk about my home life, that's something that sticks with me, was the state of the house. And so that's not to say that our house now is dirty. It's actually the opposite. Assessors know that, people's life experiences, they shape them, but they can shape them into many different ways. When you're asked these questions, again, it just brings up that self-awareness of what were your lived experiences and how did you kind of interpret that and adapt. And they'll also talk about, what you like to do in your free time, what are your interests, what are your hobbies. Again, they want to get that, bigger picture of who you are as a person. Other questions can really get to your personal and emotional maturity levels. So this is where questions could be, describe a difficult time in your life and What was that situation? How did you react to it? How did others react to it? Have you felt pressured to do something? And, how did that all play out? So just be prepared for questions that are really going to try to dig into what specific experiences you might have and how you react to it, because that's going to get to that like personal maturity. Along that same topic, they'll try to get to know how open you are with your feelings and emotions. So they might ask, if you're angry or upset or frustrated, how do you communicate that to someone? What topics do you have trouble talking about? And who you talk to about sensitive issues. And that also gets into really what your support system looks like. Another key area that the assessor will try to ask questions around is your coping skills. So what events cause stress in your life? How do you react to it? How do you manage it? And what's really important around foster care is, it's going to be a given that when you take in kids from care, there are going to be an increased number of appointments and your schedule is going to be booked up. I mean, that's just kind of a reality. So specific questions around how you manage your time, how do you, work with a very full schedule, when you get feelings of overwhelm, how do you handle that? And once they get to know you as a person, they'll start to try to dig into your attitudes and beliefs around, child welfare and foster care and adoption. They may ask you specific questions about how you feel and what your attitudes are towards primary families. And this is where it's really important to be honest. So what is your opinion of parents who lose custody of their children? What's your opinion of parents who have substance abuse issues? How do you feel about domestic violence? What would you tell a child about why they're in care? How could you help a child with their feelings of loss and grief around not being around their birth parents? Maybe even are you willing to mentor a birth parent? And this is something that we don't see enough of. And I think it is critical to the success of the family and also builds a really strong relationship with the foster caregiver, the child, and the extended family of that child. What problems do you foresee working with child welfare in the system? And again, this is your chance to be honest. They could listen to you and maybe provide information that helps you get a clearer picture of the child welfare system. But for example, I remember something that I responded with was, I feel like it's a lot of red tape. I feel like it's gonna take a lot of patience and understanding, which is, what I have found to be true over the years. And specifically listed in the questions that we were asked was, how would you handle decisions that you don't agree with? And that's something we did come across. So kind of anticipate some of those situations that might come up and respond honestly. And then in general, they'll ask about your understanding of foster care and adoption. So what responsibilities as a foster caregiver do you think that you have? How do you plan on including a child in your family while they're with you? They'll also ask about your motivation to foster and to adopt. So why do you want to become a foster caregiver? Why do you want to adopt a child from foster care? And this is where some invasive questions might come up, because if you're a person or a couple who has struggled with infertility, this is where they might ask questions like that. And again, it's not to disqualify anyone, it's just to see what their motivations are, because that'll help the assessor make a decision on your readiness to foster or adopt. Something else I feel can be invasive for some people is talking about their religious affiliations or their spiritual beliefs. And this is important because children in foster care have freedom of religion. So if you are affiliated with a specific church, religion, if you have certain spiritual beliefs, the assessor is going to need to know that and know what your openness is to adapt and be flexible to the children coming into your home. It's not meant to disqualify. It's really just meant to, help understand, and if there's additional education that might be needed. So if you're a family who, goes to church every single Sunday, are you going to be able to take in a child who does not choose to practice that particular faith? Or maybe their family does not want them participating, because it'll depend on the age of the child, whether that decision is the child's or if it's the family's. But my point here is that children who are in care, they have a right to choose. Them and their families, they have a right to choose. So if you go to church every single Sunday and that's a non-negotiable for you, that's something that needs to be established up front. There is probably respite care that your, agency or county can support you with. Maybe they say, okay, we'll be prepared to, make sure you have an alternative caregiver who can watch the child every Sunday. So again, just to understand, what does your family look like? What are your schedules? What are your habits and routines? And, how will a child fit into that? And they'll ask more specific questions like, what would you do if the child has different beliefs as you? Will you expect a child to practice the same religion as you? These are important questions. And then there will be questions about your parenting experiences, your skills in that area. And this isn't to say that you have children in the home where you have direct experience, but they'll ask, if you have children in the home, what have those experiences been like? If you have children in your family, in your neighborhood that you have experiences with, talk about that. Or maybe those experiences are around work. And so, maybe you work at a daycare, maybe you work at a hospital in a pediatric unit. These questions will try to gauge what your expectations are for children of different ages, what you believe to be, the developmental milestones of those different ages as well. And again, this isn't to disqualify someone if they don't have experience, but it's meant to provide, possibly additional training. So if you're saying, we want 0 to 2, those are the placements we want to take in, great, but you haven't had experience with those ages. And, that's a super demanding age. As a parent, you're literally the lifeline to these children. And so if you haven't had experience, they're going to want to ask deeper questions to make sure you're ready to go through the education and the training so that you're prepared. There will also be questions about interpersonal relationships. They want to look at the stability and the quality of those relationships. And if you're in a relationship currently, when John and I were going through this process, we were already married. They're going to want to know your story. They want to know how you met, how long you've known each other, how long you've been together. They'll want to get into how conflict is addressed and resolved in your relationship. Maybe how decisions are made, and if you disagree, what happens then. This is all to just get a feel for how you are in your relationship, because adding a child to that relationship and to that home is going to cause stressors, and it's going to bring up things for you. So making sure that there is stability and a high quality relationship is going to be important. So I know I kind of ran through those categories and topics and tried to give examples of different questions that you might be asked during your interview, but I wanted to give a pretty high level overview of what that process would look like. So if you were just curious, I hope that this video gave you enough information that answered your questions. And if you're a potential foster caregiver who's about to go through the home study and interview, I hope that this really put you at ease, really gave you an opportunity to take a look at the questions, think about your life experiences, kind of reflect on those and see how it would impact you as you move forward in the process. If you had specific questions that stood out to you when you went through your interview, feel free to drop them in the comments below. It might help somebody else. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can check out our future videos, and we'll see you next time.